Hello, you're listening to Found, TechCrunch's podcast that brings you the stories behind the startups. You're probably aware of the reckoning higher education has been facing the past few years. From skyrocketing admissions to falling enrollment, many institutions and companies have tried to solve higher ed's issues, and one startup thinks it has cracked the code. Today we're talking to Tade Oyerinde from Campus, a fully online community college that helps students pay less while adjunct professors make more money. I'm Becca Skutak, and I'm taking this one solo, but don't you worry, my co-host Dominic Midori-Davis will be back next week. But for today, here's my conversation with Tade. Hey Tade, how's it going?
Hey Becca, I'm doing all right, getting my third coffee for the day, so all good.
Oh, third coffee of the day. Whew. That means we're definitely ready for this conversation then, I think.
Totally ready.
Perfect. Well, let's waste no time then. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about campus.edu?
Sure. At Campus, we help young people complete their first 2 years of college. We are a fully accredited 2-year college where you get to learn from some of the best professors from the top schools in the country. Think schools like Princeton, UCLA, NYU. Take live online classes for 2 years. And then we help you transfer into a 4-year school to complete your bachelor's degree. And I think the coolest thing is that the federal government actually pays for the tuition for the majority of the students. So it's called a Pell Grant. It's $10,000 a year. The vast majority of our students don't pay anything out of pocket, and not a single one of our students takes on student loans. So knock out the first years of college, learning from the best professors through live online classes, and then you transfer into a 4-year school with no debt.
And it's no secret to anyone who's had any touch or gets near the higher ed ecosystem that there's something fundamentally not working with it right now. But even with that being said, you don't see many folks trying a new approach, especially with what you guys are doing and actually taking a new approach to the actual learning the classes, the community college aspect itself. So I'm definitely curious, how did you get the idea to launch something like this? What was that process like?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So I originally started the company in 2016 to build online learning software. Think like Slack plus Discord/Zoom for colleges and universities. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not like an enterprise sales kind of guy. I wanted to avoid that and avoid selling into the universities. And so instead, we had a policy of just going directly to professors. And we would show professors our software, say, hey, you're teaching an online class, UCLA, at ASU, at NYU, wherever. You should use this instead of, at the time, Skype or nothing. And the online classes didn't have any video, audio, live component. And so the completion rates were low and they didn't love the experience. And so we basically got them to adopt it and went professor by professor. In 2018, I was at UCLA. I got into this professor's office. I'm going to show him our software. It was called Campus Wire. And I get into his office and he's got an air mattress off to the side of his desk. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, yeah. I live 5 hours away. I can't afford to live anywhere near Westwood. I'm an adjunct professor. I make like $53,000 a year. I shower in the gym, sleep in the office Monday through Friday. That's kind of life. And I was just like completely floored, like totally shocked. I thought I knew what adjunct professors meant. Like my mother is a college dean. Like I know higher ed pretty well. I thought an adjunct was like Michelle Obama or James Comey wants to give back. So he teaches a class at Georgetown Law for fun. But I sort of discovered, what I call the adjunct faculty crisis through that experience. And so like today at most schools in the country, even top universities like Princeton or MIT or UCLA, close to 50, in many cases, more than 50% of professors are adjuncts. And so they're kind of like the Uber drivers of higher ed. They're typically on 6 or 12-month contracts. They don't have great job security and they don't earn much. In fact, a Berkeley study that I came across I think in 2019, found that 24% of adjuncts live on welfare. So food or housing, even at top schools. And so that was like, this thing I kind of got obsessed with. And I was like, that's really weird. College tuition keeps getting more expensive and the professors are getting paid so little and they're struggling. They're like living out of their office. That's insane. I kind of put it to the back of my mind. And then a few months later, actually, funny enough, another UCLA professor just emailed customer support late at night and I was running support. He's like, hey, I'm teaching also, in addition to UCLA, at Santa Monica College, like the local community college there. I have 2 Campus Wire accounts. Can you merge them? And I was like, I didn't realize that professors from top schools could teach at a second institution at the same time.
Right.
And in this case, a community college where the tuition is like 80% less than UCLA, and they're getting the same education. That part of the education, like the class is the same. So that was pretty interesting. And I, dug into that research, kind of got obsessed with the community college. Like, wait, why aren't more people doing this? If this is like something that, is possible, and basically came across what I call the low completion rate crisis at community colleges. And so in most community colleges in the country, the graduation rate's less than 30%. It's close to 27%, the average community college in the country. So most of these kids are going, they're signing up, taking a few classes, maybe taking out a small loan and dropping out with no degree, no increased earning potential. So it's a pretty bad outcome for a lot of students. And actually, even though 82% of them, according to Columbia University's Teachers College data, 82% of them want to get a bachelor's degree when they're enrolling, only 14% ever get a bachelor's degree. If you give them 8 years, only 14% are going to get a bachelor's degree. And so I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, why is this not working? What's so broken about this pathway? And basically came across some, research from CUNY in New York. They have what's called the ASAP program. They figured out pathways to get graduation rates up, but they're too expensive. And so I thought, well, what if we took our software, ran a community college, but way more efficiently using software, kept our tuition super low so that you could afford to pay your tuition completely with these federal grants and state grants without having to take on any debt, knock out the first 2 years of college, learning from these amazing professors from top schools. So that was the idea. And then, from there, it was like, okay, well, this has never happened before. Why hasn't it? And accreditation is a big piece of that. If you're not accredited, you can't actually offer community college courses. And so I basically looked around and was like, are there any existing community colleges that are completely mission aligned with what we're trying to do that we could buy? Found a small school in Sacramento that was really excited about the same mission that I wanted to pursue. And so we bought them. That was the beginning of campus.
No, that makes sense, because I was going to ask you about the accreditation process, because like you had already said, it sounds so easy. Like, we'll set up a school, professors make more money, students do better, they pay less. That sounds like such a great ideal. But of course, the accreditation piece is huge. We've seen some of those for-profit schools run into issues with that. So it definitely makes sense to just be able to bring a college that already had that into the fold. But what was that like, too? Is it difficult to maintain accreditation? I'm going to be honest, not an area I will pretend I know very much about.
The reality is you can only do that strategy if you're lucky enough to find a school that is consistent with what your plans are and your mission is for the school.
Right.
We were very fortunate. We found a school, it's called MTI College. It's about 60 years old in Sacramento. I met the owners. The grandson of the founder was the current president, and he had 4 aunts, all in their 80s, who were the major shareholders.
Oh, wow.
And I basically, sat with them and I was like, here's what I think the vision could be. Love what you all are doing. You guys have actually done a great job. Your graduation rates are way higher than the average community college. Like, they're doing really well. But I think that community college is going to be a mostly online experience post-pandemic. And that was the big bet. And I was like, either you guys have to get excellent at online learning, or you're going to be competed out and disrupted away. And so I basically convinced them of that. And that ended up being true. Today, a plurality, about 43% of community college students are only online. They don't even ever set foot on campus. And that's the biggest block. So, they were like, let's do it. It's actually ended up being a pretty great marriage. Michael Zimmerman, who's the president, he is our president. We call him MZ. He's still on board. He's like, I want to go build this thing with you. So he became my partner, and off to the races we went.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting because we don't talk about colleges in the venture space very often. But in reality, it's kind of like a marketplace. Like, you need both professors who want to work there, and then you need both students who want to come and do those services. And I know I used to have a work-study job at my college in a department. I'm keeping things vague because I would help sometimes file the adjunct professor contracts, which I don't think I should have been doing as a work-study employee. But I see what you saw, just how low some of these contracts are, and it's crazy. And so it seems, people are going to want to jump all over this. But like, what was it actually like getting both professors wanting to work with you guys as well as students to attend as well?
You're right. It is a two-sided marketplace, but professors is the easiest part of everything. Unfortunately, they earn so little and they have so little job security that an opportunity just to earn well, we pay them about double what the average college pays them per class. We pay them $8,000 per class. It's like purely because there's a huge demand. So we have about 270 professors on our wait list just waiting to teach with us. And so that's worked really well. These are all faculty who teach at top 100 schools. Maybe 95% of them teach at top 50 schools. We have top universities and then top HBCUs and, great state schools in the mix as well. And so I think generally that's been the easiest part. The reason it worked was, I think, kind of lucky. It's because I think a big part of it is we called it campus. There was a big debate in the beginning. Should we call this something college? One
Right.
investor was like, you need to call this Obama College.
Oh my God.
I don't want to get sued by the former president, but not calling it explicitly college in the name was one of the luckiest, smartest decisions we just lucked into. When I talk to these professors, like if you're a professor at Princeton, you would never teach at lame online university X because you think of that as like way beneath you.
Right.
And it's just not, it's kind of diminishing to your brand. But because we lucked out and we called it campus, I think the professors are like, oh, this kind of feels like the future, like Airbnb to hotels or Uber to taxis. It's like campus to traditional community colleges, and they want to be a part of it. So on top of the earnings that they receive with us, I think they're really excited about the chance of being a part of what feels to them like the future of higher education. And then on, I think the student side, originally it was extremely hard because I think everyone thought we were a scam. There's been a lot of bad actors in the for-profit higher ed space. And it's like, wait, what is this? I've never heard of it. I think now that we have graduates and we've had, more and more students come through the program and they're featuring in our marketing, it's a lot easier to acquire students and to get them involved. So that I think just gets easier and easier the more good outcomes we have over time. Outcomes is kind of the only thing that really matters for the brand. It's like, do people who go to campus end up better off than when they started? And if they don't, then we'll die. And if they do, then we'll be a very large, very successful, hopefully enduring business.
More from this conversation right after a quick break.
Something I was interested about when I first started looking into this is how you guys decided to build this from the ground up curriculum-wise. Because, of course, you can go to college for so many different majors, so many different areas, and there's so many different things that fall under all those areas. How did you guys decide, what to offer at first? Or are you letting it be professor-led by who's interested in teaching? How do you sort of build out the curriculum side of it to make sure the students who are planning to then continue on do kind of have those building blocks they need?
Yeah, we just wanted to continue with what the college was doing prior to us buying it, but then really focus on nailing what our lens on the curriculum needed to be. And so the college already had a business administration associate's degree. So that's where we focus right now with our online programs. We still have some in-person, medical assisting, phlebotomy style programs in Sacramento, but the online is focused on business administration right now. And business is great because almost anything that you're going to end up doing, particularly when you're a Gen Z or Gen Alpha and you see yourself as very entrepreneurial, the fundamental skills and knowledge that you're getting at campus in our business program are going to be so valuable and applicable to whatever you're going to go do. Business is the key focus. It's already the most popular associate's degree just generally, but we're doing some cool things we'll be announcing soon around concentrations. And some kids oh, I don't really want to do business. They don't think of business as for them. They want to do sports management. And it's hey, within the business umbrella,
right? Yeah,
there are so many different dimensions that are super applicable, and having that strong foundation across business in general will set you up for success. And so we're going to be doing some cool things there.
Yeah. And I definitely want to talk about the funding aspect of this, because I know you guys recently raised a extension round, but you guys have been, or at least seemingly on paper, seems to be pretty successful in the fundraising space. So I'm definitely curious what that journey has been like with you guys. And was it tough at first to get VCs on board? Not to make a weird pun, but was there an educational element involved about why they would need to do this? Just what? Thank you. I'm here all day. But what was it like getting people on board?
Insanely hard, and then pretty straightforward as of late. One of the things you learn about fundraising is it's all about finding fit. In the beginning of an entrepreneurial journey, you're oh, I just want to pitch as many investors and convince them to work with me. Really, at least with campus, it turned out to be the case that fundraising success really came when we thought about who is the right investor for us. And then you just go and try and let them know, hey, we exist. Sam Altman was probably the first big dog who came on the team when we decided to actually not just be a software business, but actually have a community college experience as a part of the product offering and the service we were offering.
Right.
So yeah, Jason Citron and Sam Altman. Jason actually introduced me to Sam, the founder of Discord, both of whom had spent time at community college before, 4-year universities. And yeah, Jason was just this is huge. Our country needs this. I'm all in. Connected me with Sam. Sam's I've looked for this for a long time. This is before ChatGPT. It was probably a bit more easy to get a meeting with him back then than it would have been if we were starting now.
Right.
But yeah, he's like, yeah, I want to fund this. I think our country needs to make college a lot more useful, a lot more skills embedded within the degrees that are offered. It needs to be more accessible, it needs to be more efficient, and then it needs to be more adaptable. I think obviously he knew what they were working on with OpenAI and the disruption to the skill sets and the jobs that people coming straight out of college are going to have to be effective. And it's like, yeah, do you really think that these traditional community colleges are going to adapt quickly enough to be responsive to the changing landscape? Probably not. So there needs to be this highly adaptive, highly thoughtful, tech-enabled, tech-focused experience that's more efficient and accessible and successful at actually helping kids complete. So they're really excited. Since then, fundraising has been, it used to be like extremely hard. Last year was pretty tough because the market was horrible, but we got it done, and Founders Fund came in. Trey and Peter there were like super excited about what we were doing, which is funny because Peter Thiel has been really outspoken against college in general.
Right.
But they got on board and have been huge supporters, and Joe Lonsdale and some other folks. So it's definitely come together. Since then, it's been a lot of inbound. It's been a lot easier, I think, over the last 12 months.
And it would also be great if you could talk a little bit about why venture funding made sense for this business. Now, of course, you're coming at it with that startup mindset, which makes total sense to then turn to VC as a potential way to fund this. But the education space, well, you don't see really companies doing this in general, but like you don't see community colleges trying to move online and going to raise VC money and things like that. Why was VC funding the right choice for this company as opposed to, say, public money? I'm sure you can get grants in this space and things like that.
There's nearly 2,000 community colleges in America. I don't think it's obvious that what's the solution to all of our problems? Another, a 2001st. And so, it's a very novel approach that we've taken that, or at least was 3 years ago, largely unproven. I think we've mostly proven all the core tenets of the model now, and it's working extremely well. But at the time, it was like a high risk, high reward, massive problem if you can solve it, massive opportunity to make this country stronger and better. But also, if you capture a small sliver of the market, you could build a massive company. It just made a lot of sense to go to venture. And then the trick was finding the Founders Funds, the Sam Altmans, the Jason Citrons, the Bloomberg Ventures, who are looking for those huge outcomes. You could have gone to like private equity and they're like, oh, we just want to 3x our money in 5 years. Like, that's not who we go for. We go for the people who are like, we want this to fundamentally change the way people learn in America and eventually the world. I think Silicon Valley is still the place where you go if you want funding for moonshots, and that's exactly what campus was.
And I also want to talk a little bit about the timing of the company, because I know you guys launched obviously a couple of years before COVID, but thinking about what COVID did to education, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier now that you really do think community college is going to essentially fully move online, which I definitely could understand that viewpoint entirely. How does COVID play into this story? Do you think that's how you guys were able to cement yourselves? Did you guys have good traction prior to that? Like, how much does that play into the story?
To be clear, we started Campus post-COVID. Campus Wire, it's the same company. Campus Wire, just our, call it Zoom for higher ed product, is what we were building pre-COVID. Somewhat luckily in 2019, I was like, oh, we should add video to Campus Wire. And then, of course, the pandemic hits.
Perfect.
It was actually hilarious. Like, we started growing, I think it was 200% month over month, from February 2020 to April 2020. And then it was probably going to even accelerate beyond that. And I basically went to the board and I was like, hey guys, I think we should get out of the online learning software business, make our software free for all these universities that are trying to throw money at us, because I don't think this is going to, last. Like, UCLA kids want to be back on campus. Like, they want to be dating. They want to be making friends. They want to be going to parties. It's like, that's what the UCLA experience or the Arizona State experience or the UGA experience is about. So all this revenue that's flooding in, I didn't think was long-term revenue. That ended up being true. I think a lot of people raised a bunch of money in the online learning space thinking that that was going to last forever. Obviously, it wasn't. And so that's actually how I started thinking about, well, what is sustainable here? You start to go, well, community college doesn't actually have frats and sororities. There's no sports. You live at home, you drive. If you look to campus, if you live in LA, it's really annoying to have to sit in traffic for 20 minutes, take classes, and then drive back home late at night. It actually makes sense to be done fully online if you could do live online. And so it's engaging. You still get to have a social interactivity. You still get to meet face-to-face with your faculty over Campus Wire and your TAs. That was what I thought was going to become the actual legacy of COVID on the learning experience side. And then on the faculty side, just in the same way as employees don't want to go back to the office at so many companies, the professors are like, yo, I could actually teach online.
Yeah.
Not all of them want to teach fully online. I think some of them want to teach on campus. But the idea of, like, we had one professor, Stephen Kautz, one of our earliest professors, he teaches at Princeton Monday, Wednesday, Friday. He used to teach at NYU Tuesday, Thursday. And he lived in Newark, New Jersey, because it's equidistant from both. And he would literally just run helter-skelter, as my mom likes to say, back and forth from Princeton to New York City. I don't think anyone's going to do that anymore. Like, he's just like, I get to teach on campus from Princeton, New Jersey, and I can teach at Princeton from Princeton, New Jersey. And so I think there was a massive surge in demand from faculty to have these remote teaching opportunities. Prior to COVID, none of these elite professors, maybe 10% of professors from elite schools, had ever taught online. It just wasn't something they'd ever really done. I think it was a big opportunity for us to say, okay, wow, everyone got baptized, like had this like huge experience of being forced to learn online learning. And there were bad practices that they eliminated. There were best practices that they developed. Now they're actually interested and they're trained and they're ready to go. And so that was the sort of tailwind that made that a lot more obvious. But largely, I think this probably could have emerged and should have emerged before. People just hadn't had the right confluence of strategy and then like financing and then founder, probably leadership to actually make it happen.
And speaking of, I was going to ask this earlier and then the conversation kept going, but I'm going to come back to it.
Sure.
When you started CampusWire, that wasn't your first startup in the edtech space either. So I'm definitely curious, you've built this career of building companies in the education space. I know you mentioned your mom has worked in this space as well, but what got you interested in building essentially your career in edtech to begin with?
It's both super obvious if you hear my full story and then also kind of random how I got into education. So the obvious part is like my paternal grandfather was a college dean in Nigeria, a university dean. My maternal grandfather was a high school principal. My mother's a college dean. My dad started a nursing school when I was 10 or 11 in Atlanta. We used to drive around Sunday mornings, hand out flyers for the nursing school to all the like ethnic churches, like the Korean church, the Jamaican church, like to get people to go to the nursing school. And then my mother decided to homeschool my siblings and me. I have an older sister, 2 years older, and then I have a twin brother. My older sister is basically a genius. You put a book in front of her, she just like reads and learns. It's that easy. So they were like, okay, she'll be slowed down in school. Let's homeschool them. My brother and I, maybe a little bit less gifted, sort of regular people, but they still homeschooled us anyway. And when you're homeschooled in the 90s, you spend a lot of time learning online, just doing research. If I ask any question, my dad, like, oh, Dad, why is Italy shaped like a boot kicking a rock? Just go look it up. And it's like, I'd go and I'd look it up. And it's like, you take actually classes online, but you do, research. And so I had like a pretty robust and opinionated perspective on what high quality online learning could be from when I was super young. And, we did things over Skype at the time. That was the state of the art. Anyway, I sort of had a perspective on what could happen. But I went to high school and then went to study aerospace engineering. And then, kind of lame to admit it, but I watched The Social Network my third year at university. And I was like, if Zuck can do this, I could do this. Created an app that ended up going viral. It was called Uni Roulette. Basically, it was like chat roulette, but you had to have a university email address to get on. I built it with my roommate at Leeds University, a guy called Patrick, and then my twin brother, who was studying economics at Oxford at the time. Kind of blew up, hundreds of thousands of users in the first couple months. And then investors gave us $500,000. And they said, okay, you got to drop out of college to go work full time on this. And so that's how I got into startups. And then, of course, Uni Roulette had like this explosive exponential growth and then like exponential decay because it was a fad.
Right.
And of course, we spent the next like 2 years trying to recapture the magic, figure out what happened. We hired a team, moved to London. We were like, what do we do? How do we get the growth, going again? But we never could. It was a fad. It was funny. When I saw Clubhouse, I was like, I know how this story ends. It's like,
right. Yeah.
It's the same story. Real-time social, synchronous social is extremely hard. It's almost impossible. And we can talk about why if you're curious. But the one thing we did eventually have that was valuable is we had an engineering team that knew how to build both iOS and Android. And of course, at that point, the only experience we really had in life was education, college dropouts. And so we decided to go to universities and basically build them basic apps. Like all the schools wanted the same app. It's like, I need to see the dining hall menu or which speakers are coming to campus, what events are happening. And so we'd make these basic apps. You kind of copy and paste the code and then you go to another school and you can get them to license it. And so that was how I technically got into education and the edtech space, kind of by accident. kind of obvious, and I've been headed this way my whole life, but somewhere in between probably.
No, I love that story about the social network. We had a founder on recently, very different company, obviously, who's developing like male birth control. But he said he got the idea from watching 16 and Pregnant as a teenager. And our general other co-host Dom and I had this whole conversation after where we were like, there's probably a lot more startup founding stories that are tied to things like that than people are willing to admit.
Oh, yeah.
We're like, you get ideas in the randomest times. It's not always when you're in that great dinner meeting with that investor and then the idea came from you. It's like, no, it's when you're doing, you were watching the social network. You're like, why can't I build a company? Like, I love that. And I really do think there are a lot more stories of startup founding than people will admit for some reason.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, even, again, it's a little bit embarrassing, but it's true. Even before, why did I study aerospace engineering? Because I watched The Aviator. And I'd always loved airplanes. I'd always loved, the concept of flying. But watching The Aviator with Leonardo DiCaprio playing Howard Hughes, I was like, oh my God, like that's my calling. That's what I want to do. I want to both, fly, do the engineering stuff, and then eventually do the business stuff as well. And he bought TWA, the airline. And anyway, so like that was like, movies and these sort of random things can have a pretty huge impact on what we do, and especially when you're like 17. I finished high school when I was 16, so for me, I was very impressionable at the time.
No, I became a journalist because I'm nosy. It doesn't always have to be some huge, grand reason. I do want to ask a bit about, though, because you have been in this space for so long and so familiar with it and had such a different experience with education than I think a lot of us do, who just, like, if you're like me, just went to public school, expected to go to a localish university, did that, check, like move on. What was it like hiring for this company, especially at the beginning, and sort of building out the team that you guys have now? Because this is both familiar in some ways to jobs other people may have had at institutions specifically, but it is so different at the same time.
Extremely hard. The culture is extremely hard to get right. In the beginning, it was just like, oh, this is a big idea, but it's high risk. Now we've validated all of the core questions in the business. And so I think it's much easier to get world-class talent on board. But then there's still this culture question of like, do you want to bring in people who are like lifetime education experts who may work at a community college today or at a four-year university or a high school or like a Teach for America style program? Or do you want to bring in these like operationally excellent people from Airbnb and Uber and DoorDash who actually know how to change the world and build great technology and build scalable systems and make sure all the trains come and go on time? And it's like, I think the answer is you have to do both. And then that creates a really challenging problem around like the culture. Like they're very different kinds of cultures.
Right.
If we can nail it, figuring out how to combine and which roles, it obviously varies by role. You don't want software engineers who worked for universities because the good ones never have. If you have your student support role, it's easier to find people who are passionate about helping young people. They're typically already working in that area. If we can solve this culture problem, I think it becomes a huge superpower long term. And so that's why we're investing in trying to do it. But it's not easy. The way people communicate is not the same. I'm on this call with you and I'm like, I keep calling it a business because, I'm a startup guy, but then it's like, business sounds weird. Like this is education. Okay. So it's an organization. Like, which do you call it? Like, it's not obvious how to normalize these things. And you just don't want to be a traditional community college because their models don't work. Almost none of them. I don't know if there's a single community college in the country that has a balance sheet that's upside up if you remove these local, state, and government subsidies, right? And at the same time, you don't want to go the boot camp route where you're like, the traditional higher ed knows nothing and everything's wrong and we're going to do everything anew. And actually, you're just going to end up like harming students because you're careless and you're moving fast and you're breaking things. So it's like you need this delicate balance that has to be struck. And I think we're getting there, but we still have some more way to go.
No, that makes sense because I've always found that process super interesting. I have a really good friend who works in higher ed. She's a professor, but she also does research and some administrative stuff as well. And even just talking about like a job interview, in my head, there's like a very standard process. You meet with a few people. Maybe you have like a test related to the skills for the job. Same with like my field, my boyfriend's field, etc. She was telling me about some of her like interviews recently. And she was like, oh yeah, it's like 5 to 6 hours. You do like a 2-hour presentation. And I was just like, what are you talking about? And she was like, no, this is literally how it works. So it is interesting to think about trying to combine those two worlds because anything she tells me about working in academia, I'm like, wait, how do you do that? Why? She's like, that's just how they do it.
And now you know why I didn't want to sell software into the institution, like the universities themselves, because they buy software that way as well. Like, let's have an 8-hour committee debate around. It's like, no.
No, that makes total sense. But we're coming up against time. But I wanted to ask you before we wrap up here, you guys have just raised recent funding. You guys are catching this momentum. What's next? Walk me through what it looks like the next 3-5 years. What are you envisioning for campus?
Long term, I think any able-bodied person should raise their hand and say, I want to do something useful with my life. They'll come to campus and we'll do 3 things for them. The first is we will be able to help you figure out your purpose. The Japanese call it ikigai, but it's like, what's the intersection of what you're naturally gifted in, you're passionate about, and basically what the world is willing to pay you for. That's a bit of a simplification, but like, what is that? And a lot of young people today, they don't have any clue. They like fashion, but they think they have to basically be a model or a designer. And it's like, actually, there's like merchandise manager, supply chain, like special, like there's like 30 different other less obvious careers. And so, we help them define that, figure out their purpose. Then we help them create a plan. So it's like 5-step plan to going from working at Chipotle today to where you want to be. And then we help them get the skills and the knowledge that they need to get the career and the life that they want. And then we give them a credential, a degree that basically validates to the rest of the world, hey, I have these skills and this knowledge. And then most of them are going to go transfer into a 4-year university. Our first graduating class just completed. 2 of them are going to Penn State. One's going to Arizona State University. One's going to San Diego State. Like, these are great outcomes, and not a single one of them has any loans, not $1 in student loans. And so what I would love to see is, like, at scale over the next 5 years, anybody in America can come to campus and eventually the world and like get that support that they need to build the life that they want. Shorter term, we're going to be expanding, the different kinds of programs we offer. There's some really cool things coming up around AI and other more mundane, but really exciting fields as well. Marketing, sports management, etc. And it's about quality. Like, we need to be excellent at every aspect of everything we do. From the moment a student picks up the phone or goes to our website, talks to one of our team, it needs to be excellent. Like, we're literally building an office in Atlanta because I grew up in Georgia, the friendliest people in America, like just super friendly, awesome people. So that's going to be our like student support hub. I want the best experience for every single student all the way through. And then scaling up the faculty network, that's going really well. The faculty are really excited. And then helping students do that next thing. So either transfer into a 4-year, which most of them want to do, or land an awesome job.
No, that sounds like a great goal. And I'm sad we're out of time because I feel like I have so many more questions. But thanks so much for coming on the show today. This has been super fun.
Found is hosted by myself, TechCrunch senior reporter Becca Skutak, alongside senior reporter Dominic Midori-Davis. Found is produced by Maggie Stamets with editing by Kel. Our illustrator is Bryce Durbin. Found's audience development and social media is managed by Morgan Little, Alyssa Stringer, and Natalie Kreisman. TechCrunch's audio products are managed by Henry Pickavet. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.